beyond the hidden valley, yearning for beyond. I knelt on the dew-damped grass as the first light of dawn painted the mountaintops golden. Around me, the QL people bowed their heads in serene silence, hands folded in morning prayer. Our valley of Nefes was still and sacred at this hour. The only sounds are the gentle burble of the creek and the whisper of wind through ancient pines. I closed my eyes dutifully and murmured the familiar incantation of thanks to the dawn. Yet even as I whispered words of gratitude, my mind wandered beyond our hidden sanctuary. Beyond the ring of mist-wreathed peaks that encircled Nefais, I imagined the vast realm of Luminae I had read about in forbidden books. In my mind's eye rose images of endless forests, of cities with spires piercing the clouds, of oceans stretching farther than vision. A quiver of longing fluttered in my chest. I yearned to see those wonders with my own eyes instead of only on the inked pages I'd secretly pored over late at night. It was a forbidden yearning. To crave the world outside our enchanted valley was to invite danger, or so I had been taught. A gentle nudge on my shoulder snapped me back to the present. I opened my eyes to find Sorsha peering at me, a knowing glint in her green gaze. My dear friend's fiery red hair was tucked modestly under her linen hood, but a few rebellious curls caught the sunlight like copper. She had noticed my lapse in focus during prayer. I flushed and hurriedly bowed my head lower, finishing the final lines of the dawn chant in earnest. Around us, the others were rising to their feet. Prayer time concluded. I rose as well, brushing grass from my plain woolen skirt. Our clothing was humble by choice, undyed fabrics, simple embroidery of leaves along my sleeves, a reflection of our bond with nature rather than any need for finery. Dreaming of faraway lands again, really? Sorsha whispered with a half-smile as we walked back toward the village clearing. I hesitated, then gave a small nod. I cannot help it, I murmured, making sure to keep my voice low. Others were still within earshot, and I, as Princess of the QL, was expected to set an example of devotion and contentment. Discontent with our sheltered life was not something I was supposed to show. But Sorsha knew me too well to be fooled. She squeezed my hand reassuringly. One day, perhaps, she said softly, the spirits will allow us a safe journey beyond. Her tone was kind, though I could hear the doubt. For all her adventurous spirit, Sorsha was less restless than I. She found much joy within Nephi's borders, joy in tending the communal gardens, in song and story by the fireside. My friend was aware of my frustrations, but did not fully share them. We stepped onto the dirt path that wound through our village. Modest timber cottages with living roofs of grass and flowers dotted the landscape, blending harmoniously with the forest around us. A few early rising villagers were already about their chores. I waved to old Briannon, who was guiding a pair of gentle oxen, more like family pets than beasts of burden, to the fields. He bowed with a warm smile. We QL treated our animals with the same respect as people. Vegan by custom, we never slaughtered our beasts, instead nurturing them and the land with reverence. As Sorsha and I passed the open-air kitchen pavilion, mouth-watering scents of spiced porridge reached us. The community would soon break fast together. Normally, I loved this morning ritual. Sharing food crafted with love and cruelty-free ingredients, fruits and grains sweetened with wild honey. Today, however, my stomach fluttered with impatience. I wasn't hungry for fruit or bread. I hungered for knowledge, for freedom. We paused by the stone well in the center of the village, and I glanced up at the encircling mountains. The rising sun gilded the sheer cliffs that protected Nephi's like colossal guardians. Those peaks had been both our shield and our cage all my life. Out there beyond them, conflict and chaos were said to reign. In here, we lived in unbroken peace. Peace was a blessing. I knew this, yet I could not stop the question that rose unbidden in my heart each day: what lies beyond the next ridge? And why must I never see it? Sorsha followed my gaze to the peaks and bit her lip. Your father would have all our heads if he knew we even thought about going beyond Zephyr's boundary, she chided gently, reading my thoughts. I sighed. She was right. My father, King Angus, had made it quite clear that no one, especially his only daughter, was ever to venture beyond the valley's boundaries. As the princess of the QL, I was expected to someday lead our people in wisdom and safety here, continuing the tradition of isolation that had preserved us for centuries. Father's love was stern, born of fear. He feared what lay outside as fervently as I was curious about it. I know. It's just... I drew in a breath of crisp morning air laden with pine scent. Sometimes I feel like a bird in a beautiful cage, Sorsha. A cage lined with silk and filled with sweet fruits, but a cage nonetheless. Sorsha's eyes softened. I wish I had words to soothe that longing. Mo Kara, she said, using the old QL endearment for my friend. Maybe tonight you can lose yourself in one of your books, if only in imagination. She gave me a playful nudge. A small smile tugged at my lips. My beloved books, histories, epics, and travelers' journals, were my lifeline to the wider world. Most were ancient tomes passed down through generations, telling of eras long before our valley was sealed. I devoured tales of distant kingdoms under starlight when the rest of the household slept. Those brittle pages were the wings of my caged bird soul, letting it flutter a little beyond the bars. Yes, perhaps we can read together by moonlight. I agreed softly. The prospect lightened my mood for the moment. We began walking again to join the others, but I cast one last glance at the surrounding peaks and the azure sky above them. Somewhere out there were the answers to the ache in my heart. I was sure of it. One day, I vowed silently, I will see what lies beyond Nephise. Little did I know fate would grant that wish sooner than any of us expected, in ways none of us could foresee. The Hidden Valley's legacy. For 300 years, the QL people of Nephise lived in blissful seclusion. This was no accident of geography alone, but by the design of powerful enchantment. In ages past, when the realm of Luminae fell to strife and conquest, the QL retreated to this fertile valley veiled by cascading waterfalls and perpetual mist. Our lore speaks of Zephyr, a benevolent guardian spirit, or perhaps an ancient maid, who cast a mighty veil of protection around Nephise. Under Zephyr's enchantments, no outsider could find our valley. Wandering souls would simply overlook the narrow canyon that led here, or find themselves inexplicably turned back by gentle confusion. Generations of QL were born, lived and died under the safety of Zephyr's veil. While wars raged beyond the mountains, turning kingdoms to ash, we remained untouched. We nurtured our forests, sang our prayers at dawn and dusk, and practiced our subtle earth magics to help crops grow and heal the sick. Peace and secrecy were our way of life. The outside world, with its greed and violence, became but distant thunder beyond our bright horizon. Yet the elders remembered enough history to instill caution in each new generation. They told us of the Arterian, ruthless colonizers who had once swept across continents, subjugating peoples and plundering resources wherever they roamed. They spoke, too, of great mages whose power had been twisted by ambition, the Eldorian sorcerers who sought domination to rival the Arterian Empire. These tales were old, but they served to warn us why the veil must never be broken. We were taught that if the wider world knew of the QL, of our healing magic and communion with nature, we would be seen as prizes to exploit, perhaps even enslaved for our gifts. Our very way of life would be destroyed. And so, Nephise remained hidden by intent and oath. Our kings and queens, guided by Zephyr's unseen hand, upheld the ancient compact that the QL would stay in this sanctuary, remaining neutral and apart from the tumults of Luminae beyond. In exchange, Zephyr's enchantment would guard us from discovery. It was a pact kept in trust for centuries, and none alive had ever dared test its limits. None, that is, until Princess Ryleig's restless heart began to test them in her dreams. And beyond the mountains, destiny was already stirring. A destiny that would soon force the hidden and the outside world to collide, for better or worse. Tales by Moonlight. That night, silver moonlight bathed the valley. The glow of our twin moons, Isel and Mona, shimmered on the leaves and turned the river to a ribbon of mercury. I stole away from the hearth after my parents retired to bed, careful not to wake the household. Wrapping a woven shawl around my shoulders, I slipped out into the mild summer night to meet my friends. By an ancient oak on a gentle slope above the village, Sorsha and Lachlan awaited me. Lachlan had lit a tiny witchlight, which bobbed in the air like a tame firefly, casting a soft blue luminance over the mossy clearing. At my approach, he flicked his fingers and let the witchlight dissipate. No need for it with moonlight so bright. "You're late, Your Highness," Lachlan teased quietly, a lopsided grin on his face. I made a face at him for the title. He only ever used it to poke fun. Between us friends, I was just Ryleigh, never princess. Lachlan was a miller's son, steady and stalwart as an oak. He'd been my playmate since toddler years, and now at 19 he had grown broad-shouldered from hauling grain sacks, though his eyes remained boyishly earnest. I had to wait for Mother to stop hovering. I whispered back, settling down on a fallen log beside Sorsha. She was unusually anxious tonight, kept reminding me to say extra prayers for guidance. I rolled my eyes a bit. Mother was often perceptive of my moods. Perhaps she sensed the stirrings of change in the air even if she couldn't name them. Sorsha produced a bundle from her satchel, a leather-bound old book. "I brought one of the Chronicles of Lumine," she said, her voice hushed but excited. "Figured it might suit your mood, Ray." My heart leapt. The Chronicles were a series of historical accounts penned by our ancestors before the valley was sealed. They described realms and events of the outside world in great detail. I had read them all multiple times, but never tired of hearing the words aloud among friends, imagining ourselves out there. Lachlan, however, crossed his arms. "Is that wise?" he murmured. "If the elders caught us reading those, they keep such texts locked away for a reason. They don't want us dwelling on before." His tone carried the worry I expected. Lachlan was ever the cautious one. "No elders here but us and the trees," I replied, patting the log. "Come sit. We'll read just a little." I understood his concern, but the risk felt negligible hidden under the stars. And the thought of not reading on a night like this, when my spirit was clawing at its confines, was unbearable. After a brief hesitation, Lachlan sighed and sat on the grass at our feet. Sorsha opened the tome reverently. The moon's radiance was enough for our keen QL eyes to make out the flowing script on the aged parchment. She began to read in a soft, melodic voice. "In the 30th year of the Eldorian ascendancy, the armies of Arteria did push north into the highlands of Emrys. There they met fierce resistance from the mage lords who held the high passes. Blood turned the snow red upon the peaks, and the winds carried the cries of the fallen." As Sorsha read on, I closed my eyes and envisioned it all. Windswept highlands, armoured legions clashing with robed sorcerers flinging fire. The names were familiar in my memory. Arterians and Eldorian mages, locked in their eternal duel for power. They were long ago events, yet somehow hearing of them now made the outside world feel a touch closer, a shade more real. Lachlan's face was pensive in the moonlight. "Why must they always fight?" he muttered when Sorsha paused for breath. "All those lives wasted. It sounds so senseless." "It was senseless," I agreed softly. The Chronicles often frustrated me in that way. The chroniclers recounted wars and conquests as if they were inevitable tides of history. But I always searched between the lines for the people, the lives disrupted. Perhaps if they knew the peace we know, they'd choose differently. I mused. Sorsha gave me a sad smile. Not everyone values harmony as we do, Rayleigh. Outside Nefis, ambition often drowns out compassion. We're different. Different. She didn't say better, but I heard it in her voice, the pride of the QL in our gentle ways. It was a quiet pride, never boastful, yet it marked us. We did not kill for food. We healed without asking for reward. We thanked the trees when we took wood, and the trees answered by growing strong. Perhaps it was inevitable we would see the outside world as cruel by comparison. Still, I didn't want to believe that cruelty and conquest were the whole story of Luminae. Not everyone out there can be ruthless. I protested. Think of the writers of these books, the explorers, the poets who chronicled beauty as well as war. There must be good people beyond our valley. Ordinary folk who suffer under the conflict and yearn for peace, just like us. Maybe so. Lachlan allowed, stretching his long legs. But they don't have Zephyr's protection as we do. Peace is not theirs to keep. And you know, if any power out there did find a peaceful, magic-gifted people like us, they would swoop in. Arterians or Eldorians, either one would covet what we have. He plucked a blade of grass and rolled it between his fingers, jaw tight. He'd heard the same warnings I had all our lives: to be discovered is to be conquered. Lachlan's own great-grandmother had fled Arterian slavers as a girl and found refuge in Nefis, one of the last outsiders to join our tribe before the valley was sealed. Her stories had undoubtedly fueled his caution. I fell silent, unable to refute it. My desire to see the world wrestled with the ingrained fear of leading danger to our doorstep. This internal battle had no easy resolution. Sorsha cleared her throat gently, breaking the heavy mood. Shall I read more? Perhaps a happier passage. Here, about the Festival of Lights in Luminae's capital. She flipped a few pages ahead, seeking lighter fare. But before she could continue, a sudden breeze stirred through the clearing, rustling the oak's leaves. I tilted my head. The wind carried a faint sound, like distant thunder, or... It faded quickly, and the night returned to stillness save for a cricket's chirp. Lachlan was already on his feet, alert. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Sorsha closed the book, listening intently. We exchanged uneasy glances. Thunder was rare on a clear night like this, and that other undertone. Were those shouts on the wind? Impossible. No outsiders could be near. Probably just the mountain echo playing tricks, I said, trying to sound confident. Yet a prickle of unease crawled up my spine. Something felt off in the night air, some subtle charge of energy that hadn't been there moments before. Sorsha must have sensed it too. She looked at me with widening eyes. "Perhaps we should have run straight home then," reported the anomaly to the elders and Zephyr. But curiosity tugged at me even through my wariness. If there was some strange sound, maybe an animal or a rock slide, I wanted to see. It could be nothing, or it could be something new. And new was irresistible. Let's just take a quick look from the ridge. I found myself suggesting the one overlooking the canyon. If anything's amiss, we'll spot it from there. Ray, I don't know if... Lachlan began, but Sorsha was already tucking the chronicle away and rising. A quick look, Sorsha agreed. I feel something too. She glanced south, toward the far end of the valley, where a narrow canyon led out to the world. Our closed gate to Luminae. Lachlan groaned under his breath, half in exasperation, half in worry. But he followed as Sorsha and I set off, our footsteps light and quiet over the grass. We were QL, and moving invisibly through the forest was second nature. 3 shadows slipping between trunks, we ascended a gentle slope toward a rocky outcrop that gave a small view beyond the tree line. My heart thudded faster with each step. I could taste electricity in the air now. A faint tang on my tongue, raising the hairs on my arms. The very ether of magic felt perturbed. I had only felt something like this once before, when Zephyr performed a grand healing ritual during a plague outbreak. It felt as if unseen threads in the air were being plucked. We reached the ridge and looked down toward the canyon pass that marked the valley's southmost point. Moonlight pooled in the vale, and all seemed as it should. Towering stone walls draped in vines, guarding our only entrance. The canyon floor was empty. No invaders, no creatures, no. A flash of light suddenly flared further beyond the canyon, just out of the valley. It was brief, like a distant lightning strike, yet there was no cloud in that direction. A heartbeat later, the ground under our feet trembled subtly, as if echoing a faraway impact. Sorsha inhaled sharply. "What in the spirit's name?" Lachlan grabbed my arm. "We should fetch Zephyr now," he urged in a tense whisper. This isn't normal. He was right. This was beyond us. But even as he said it, I saw something that made me gasp. At the far end of the canyon, the very air against the cliffside was rippling. A vertical sheen of shimmering light, almost imperceptible, had appeared near the canyon's sealed exit. It wavered like heat haze, about the height of two people, widening by the second. My breath caught. I knew at once what it must be, though I had never seen one. No Ki-El had. It could only be one of the rumored rogue portals spoken of in terrified whispers by our scouts. Small tiers in reality, doorways that were not meant to open. And this one was opening right where our hidden path out of Nephis lay. The protective enchantments were supposed to prevent any path from revealing itself. But this was something different, something not accounted for by Zephyr's original spell. A raw magic tear that disobeyed all boundaries. "We really must fetch Zephyr," Lachlan repeated, more urgent now. He tugged Sorsha's sleeve as well. "Go, both of you. Wake the elders. I'll keep watch here." Sorsha looked torn, shifting on her feet. I, however, couldn't move. My eyes were locked on that burgeoning shimmer. Within it, shapes and colours started to form. It was as though a painting were being unveiled through the rippling veil, the outline of trees not of our valley, an alien dark sky beyond, flickers of movement. Another place was on the other side of that portal. A sound drifted through, faint but unmistakable, a cry of distress. It sounded like a child's wail, full of fear. My heart lurched. Without thinking, I took a step forward down the slope. "Rayleigh, wait," hissed Lachlan. He tried to grab my wrist, but I was already slipping from his grasp like a breath of wind. I had to get closer. I had to see. Sorsha whispered anxiously behind me. "Ray, don't. It's too dangerous." Bai heard the whimper again, and a chorus of panicked shouts beyond it. Chaos lay beyond that portal. Someone needed help. Every instinct in me, QL and royal and compassionate, ignited. I was trained since childhood in healing and protective magic. How could I stand by if an innocent was in danger just a few strides away, barrier or no? I picked up my pace, half running down the path toward the canyon mouth. The portal was fully formed now, a glowing oval of swirled light hovering a few inches above the ground, crackling at the edges. Up close, I could see through it as if through a window. On the other side was a forest at night, but not a tranquil one. Trees were ablaze with unnatural green fire, and the sky churned with smoke. Silhouettes of people were fleeing between charred trunks. I glimpsed a small figure, a girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, stumbling and crying near the portal's far side as two looming shapes closed in on her. They looked like armored men, but their forms flickered oddly, as if distorted by the magic. Terror and resolve surged in me. There was no time to think of consequences. I raised my palm and felt ancient words of power leap from my tongue. Asharoj! A bolt of silvery light shot from my hand, straight through the portal, and struck the ground between the girl and her pursuers. It wasn't an attack. Rather, a burst of pure light meant to startle and blind. I heard the men shout in surprise. They halted, arms raised to shield their eyes from the sudden brilliance. The little girl tripped as she scrambled away, falling to her knees right at the threshold of the portal. She looked up, and through the veil our eyes met. Hers wide and wet with tears, mine brimming with urgent encouragement. "Come through." I beckoned in the common tongue, praying she could hear me. "It's okay." Behind me, Sorsha had caught up, panting, and stood at my shoulder, Lachlan a few steps behind her. Sorsha was trembling, but she nodded toward the child. She understood. I had to save this girl. With a sob, the girl crawled forward and tumbled through the shimmering doorway. Sorsha lunged and caught her in a gentle embrace, pulling the terrified child into our side of the world. I felt a fleeting relief, one life saved. But it was fleeting indeed, for one of the armoured figures, recovering from the flash, now noticed the portal itself and the two strange young women standing beyond it. He shouted something to his companion. I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I caught the tone. Astonishment, triumph. Without hesitation, he started to step through after the girl. For an instant, half his body crossed into our valley. A hulking man in burnt leather armour, face streaked with soot and malice. Sorsha screamed. Lachlan, arriving at last, instinctively thrust out both hands and uttered a sharp, guttural phrase I'd never heard from him. A blast of force like a sudden gust of hurricane wind erupted and struck the intruder full on. The man was flung back entirely through the portal, hitting a tree trunk on the far side with a sickening thud. He crumpled, unconscious or worse. "Lachlan!" I exclaimed, astonished by that display. He had always been adept with weather charms to winnow grain, but that force was beyond anything I knew he could do. Adrenaline courses strange magic through even gentle folk, it seems. The second pursuer did not try to cross. I saw him clearly now on the other side, a gaunt figure with glowing symbols circling his wrist, an Aldorian mage perhaps, by his garb. His eyes locked with mine across the dimensional threshold. In them I saw not anger, but stark fear, flames from the burning forest reflected in those dark irises as he raised a hand not to attack us, but to trace a pattern in the air. Perhaps he meant to seal the rift or cast some curse. I would never find out. Behind him, a new glow burst forth, much larger and more terrible than the gentle portal. A column of white fire arced down from the sky, striking somewhere nearby with a thunderous roar. The ground quaked. The mage on the far side recoiled in horror, abandoning whatever spell he attempted. He fled from view, deeper into the smoky woods, his shouts lost to the din. I clutched Sorsha and the little girl, shielding them as best I could from the brilliant light and heat radiating through. Lachlan pressed close on the girl's other side, covering her with his cloak. Our ears rang with echoes of the explosion. Then, abruptly as it came, the white fire dissipated. The night beyond the portal fell eerily dark. Even the green flames had been snuffed out by that heavenly bombardment. Nothing moved in the blackened forest. I realized I was holding my breath. Carefully, I lifted my head and looked through the portal window. Where once trees had stood was now a smouldering crater and scattered ash. Whoever had unleashed that power, Arterians with some dreadful new weapon, or Eldorian sorcery gone awry, had left nothing but ruin. A chill of fear and sorrow flowed through me. This was the reality of the outside world, the war and devastation we had been spared. And now a piece of it had burst into our safe haven, changing our lives forever. Sorsha's hand found mine, trembling. "Zephyr, we must pray. Pray to fetch Zephyr," she whispered, voice shaky. "He can close this thing." Yes, the portal still shimmered, though unstable. The edges flickered more erratically now, perhaps damaged by the magical turmoil. We had to close it before anything else came through. Or worse, before it collapsed with someone on the wrong side. I gently pulled the little girl away to look at her. She was QL-like in size, but clearly human mortal, her dark hair singed at the ends, face smudged with soot. She stared up at me, round-eyed and uncomprehending of our language. Tears had left clean tracks down her cheeks. "It's okay now, love," I cooed softly, offering what comfort I could. "You're safe with us." She didn't understand the words, but perhaps my tone soothed her a little. She clung to Sorcia's waist, sobbing quietly with exhaustion and shock. Lachlan stood, jaw clenched. "I'll run for Zephyr and the elders," he said, taking charge. "Riley, Sorcia, do not go through that portal. Promise me." He looked directly at me as he said it, knowing too well the wild idea that might be forming in my head. I opened my mouth, and for a moment, I nearly promised. The rational part of me knew my first duty now was to protect our people, to get the girl to safety and let wiser heads handle this tear in reality. Already, villagers would have felt the tremor and seen lights. They'd be rousing. My father would be awake, alarmed for me. The right thing to do was retreat with Sorcia and the child, wait for Zephyr's guidance. And yet, beyond the portal, beyond the smoking devastation, dawn was breaking. I realized with a start that through the dissipating smoke, I could see a sliver of pinkish horizon on the far side. Dawn in the outside world. Something about that simple sight. Dawn in another land. Transfixed me. My whole life, dawn had only ever broken over the familiar peaks of Nefis. Now I stood on the threshold of a new sky, a new land at my feet. This was the moment I had yearned for, granted by fate in all its danger and glory. If I turned back now, I might never have another chance. Zephyr would seal the valley tighter than ever after this scare. My father would double the guard. The thought of returning to life as it was, pretending I hadn't glimpsed what lay beyond it, was unbearable. I looked to Sorcia. She still held the girl, murmuring a lullaby under her breath. Feeling my eyes on her, she met my gaze. In her face I saw the same conflict. Fear, responsibility, but also a spark of wonder. She knew what this meant to me. Lachlan noticed my hesitation and stepped forward. "Really, no," he pleaded, voice low and urgent. "Don't even think it. Your father, our people, if you go out there. I'll come back," I found myself saying, my voice strangely calm. "I promise, Lachlan. But I have to see. I have to help. There could be others out there in need, and maybe I can find out what caused this." I gestured to the portal and the carnage beyond. "You've helped this one," he argued, nodding at the now half-conscious girl. "Let that be enough. It's too dangerous out there for us." Behind him, down in the valley, I saw lantern lights bobbing. Villagers approaching, alarmed by the light and noise. Time was almost up. Sorcia surprised us both by speaking up, her voice wavering but resolute. If you go, Riley, you won't go alone." She gently transferred the child into Lachlan's arms. "Take her back to the village," she instructed him. Then she stepped beside me and slipped her hand into mine. Her fingers were cold but steady. I stared at Sorcia. "You don't have to." "I do," she insisted, summoning a brave smile though tears shone in her eyes. "You are my princess and my dear friend. I won't let you run off into that unknown alone. Besides," she attempted a light laugh, "someone has to keep you out of too much trouble." Lachlan looked between us in dismay. The little girl in his arms whimpered, and he instinctively bounced her to soothe her, which also kept him from physically restraining us. "Sorcia, please," he begged. "Both of you, think about this. If the Arterians or anyone catch you..." I leaned forward and kissed Lapland's cheek swiftly. "Tell father I'm sorry," I said softly. "Tell him I'll make it right. And take care of the child. She's scared and alone. He shook his head, tears now streaking his cheeks as the gravity hit him. Riley, don't do this. It was half sob, half whisper, but I had made my choice. The pull of destiny was stronger than my fear. Perhaps Zephyr himself was guiding my heart now. I squeezed Sorsha's hand, and together we turned to face the portal. Its energy swirled, waning slightly but still open. A doorway to everything I had ever dreamed of, and everything I had feared. With a final deep breath, I stepped forward through the veil. There was a sensation like passing through cool mist. My skin tingled. For an instant, I was nowhere. Between worlds, a foot in each realm. Then one more step, and the mist cleared. I stood on solid ground, Sorsha right behind me, our hands clasped tightly. We were outside. The air smelled sharply of soot and ozone. Around us lay the scorched clearing where that terrible blast had struck. Black ash rained softly like snow. My eyes stung from the acrid smoke that lingered. In the distance, I heard faint echoes of battle. Clashing metal, distant cries. Perhaps the war moving further away from this spot. Dawn's light grew steadily, revealing a scene both tragic and awe-inspiring. This forest had been beautiful once, tall oaks and ferny undergrowth, much like our own woods. Now it was marred by craters and smouldering embers. Yet beyond the destruction, rolling hills and far-off mountains beckoned, painted in early sunlight. The world was so open. The sky arched so vast above, unbounded by encircling peaks. Sorsha coughed, pulling her shawl over her nose against the smoke. I realized I still held her other hand in a death grip and forced myself to release it, though neither of us strayed far from each other's side. It's so big, Sorsha whispered, voice muffled by the cloth. I wasn't sure if she meant the devastation or the world itself. Likely both. I knelt and touched the charred earth, still warm. My fingers came away blackened. This is what war does, I thought. Even without seeing a battle, its aftermath spoke volumes. Lives had been extinguished here. I could feel the echoes of pain and fear lingering like ghosts. Tears pricked my eyes, both from sorrow and the harsh air. At that moment, I silently renewed my promise. I would return to Nephise, but not until I'd learned why this war burned so hot, and if there was some way, any way, I could help douse the flames before they consumed all of Lumini, including my hidden people. Behind us, the portal flickered. I looked back and through it saw Lachlan's figure retreating, carrying the girl toward the approaching lantern lights of our people. Our eyes met one last time. He lifted a hand in farewell, or perhaps in a futile last appeal for us to come back. I smiled sadly and nodded to him in gratitude and goodbye. Then the portal began to shrink, the magic sustaining it clearly unstable after the blast. Sorsha noticed it too. "Ree, look!" she gasped. The shimmering oval narrowed, edges pulling inward like a closing eye. This was expected. Rogue portals never lasted long, from what little we knew. We both stumbled back a step, as the gap dwindled to the size of a door, then a window. Through that small window, I caught a last glimpse of my beloved valley, a cluster of figures arriving at the canyon. Tiny, distant. I thought I saw the glint of Zephyr's silver hair among them. "I'm sorry," I thought toward him, toward my father and mother who must be there now. "I'll be back. I'll keep us safe." In a soft whoosh, the portal closed completely. A final ripple in the air, and it was gone. The canyon wall now stood solid and unmarred as before, as if no breach had ever been. We were sealed out. A wave of emotion threatened to overwhelm me. Regret, relief, fear, excitement all at once. I took a shaky breath and felt Sorsha's arms slip around my shoulders. I leaned into her. We were all we had now, 2QL far from home in a world that had forgotten our kind existed. "We'll find a way back," Sorsha said firmly, perhaps to comfort us both. Zephyr will surely open a path when it's safe. Yes, I agreed, finding strength in her resolve. I squared my shoulders and wiped my tears, leaving a streak of soot on my face. But first we find out what we can. About the wall, about these portals. I thought of the child we saved. How many more innocents like her were in harm's way? How long before another portal opened? And would it be in our valley or somewhere even less fortunate? Sorsha managed a small, brave grin. Lead on, princess. This is your grand adventure, is it not? I looked at my dear friend, her face smudged, her eyes bright despite the fear. And I laughed softly. Our grand adventure, I corrected, giving her hand a grateful squeeze. Together, we stepped forward out of the blasted glade and onto a dirt path that led into the surviving woods. Every step took us farther from the life we knew and deeper into the unknown. The rising sun at our backs cast long shadows before us, as if the spirits of the valley walked with us into this new day. Epilogue, dawn of a new journey. From a high ledge on the cliffs of Nephis, a solitary figure watched the sun crest the horizon. Zephyr's age-lined face was sorrowful yet proud as he gazed at the now quiet canyon far below, where the last trace of the rogue portal had vanished. He felt the fabric of his enchantment reweaving itself, closing the rent. The valley has been sealed again, at least for now. The old guardian closed his eyes and sent a silent prayer on the morning breeze. A prayer for the two brave souls who had crossed into the world. Perhaps he had sheltered the QL too well, he mused. Perhaps this was fate's way of correcting the balance. The time of absolute hiding was over. A new dawn had come, and with it, the QL princess would carve her own legend beyond the valley. Far beyond Zephyr's sight, in the great realm of Luminae, smoke rose from distant battlefields and armies gathered under grim banners. The war that had been raging would now begin to shift, ever so slightly, with the entrance of a young woman whose heart knew only peace and a loyal friend whose courage outshone her fear. In the songs and sagas yet to be written, this moment, Ryleague's first steps beyond the hidden valley, would be remembered as the prologue to great change. And as Ryleague and Sorsha ventured forth under the wide open sky, one chapter of their lives had closed, but another had just begun. The unknown road lay ahead, fraught with peril and promise. Whatever awaited, be it the clash of Arterian steel, or the perilous spells of Aldorian mages, or allies in unexpected places, Ryleague felt ready to face it. Her spirit, once confined to a secret veil, was now as boundless as the dawn. With hope and courage, she whispered into the morning air, finishing the prayer that all QL spoke after sunrise. We greet the day. Thus did the young princess of the QL embrace her destiny beyond the hidden valley of Nephis, beneath a new and endless sky. The epic of her journey had only just begun.